Всім доброго дня. Раді вітати вас на нашому вебінарі програмне, присвячене програмному забезпеченню Chromeleon. Це завершуючи в цьому році вебінари з серії Лабораторія 2.0 для фармацевтичної галузі. Я гадаю, ми почекаємо хвилин 5, і тоді будемо, або 5, або менше хвилин, щоб всі доєдналися, і тоді будемо починати. Мене звати Ганна Бакал, компанія АЛТ Україна. Сьогоднішнім спікером буде наш партнер з компанії Thermo Fisher Scientific. Буде розповідати презентацію безпосередньо про Chromeleon. Якщо у вас будуть виникнути якісь запитання, ви можете в будь-який момент писати їх в чат. І тоді ми після презентації, щоб не переривати, так, ми влаштуємо QA-сесію і тоді зможемо відповісти на ваші запитання. Підкажіть, будь ласка, чи гарно ви мене всі чуєте, чи видно мене? Напишіть, будь ласка, в чат. О, чудово. Я думаю, буквально декілька хвилин і будемо розпочинати. Я думаю, ми можемо розпочинати. Ще раз всім доброго дня. Хотіла нагадати, як і на попередніх вебінарах, після вебінару ви отримуєте одразу, або, можливо, трошки з часом, отримуєте сертифікат про відвідування вебінару, а також посилання на запис цього вебінару на Ютубі. Тому, я думаю, якщо що там до нас ще хтось доєднається, не буде проблемою, тому давайте починати. Я сподіваюся, нічого не завадить нам з вами провести вебінар. Jawad?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Can you turn on your camera? Because it's, I don't know why it doesn't work.
Okay.
Your camera, not screen.
Okay, that's odd because I didn't turn anything off, but hold on. Okay.
Yes.
Hello.
It's okay.
Should I start now?
Yes, please start.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Hannah, for the introductions. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to attend this presentation. A couple of weeks ago, one of my colleagues at Thermo Fisher did a presentation on our various instrument offering, specifically HPLC. This presentation will be on the software from Thermo Fisher Scientific called Chromeleon. So without further ado, we'll get started. This is a very general presentation. I will try to cover most of the features of the software, at least most of the most important features of the software, both from a laboratory user, and also from the IT and administrative perspective. But again, I cannot cover everything that's in Chromeleon within 45-50 minutes. And I'm sure you're going to have questions, so feel free to type those in the chat box, and we will try to address as many of those as at the end of the presentation. So Chromeleon, which is now at version Chromeleon 7.3.2, is the gold standard chromatography data system in the industry. And not just pharmaceutical industry, but all analytical laboratories like food and beverages, petrochemicals, whatever industry that uses chromatography and mass spectrometry instrument, our software is used there. The reason it is the gold standard for the last 3 decades or so is because it's offers intelligent functionality, meaning it does everything you need, and it also offers operational simplicity. It does everything in a fast and easy way with as few clicks of the button as possible. It has various tools to make your life simpler in the laboratory. For example, offering you e-workflow, which is an automation for defining a sequence and then doing the analysis, generating results and reports. It controls various instruments, GC, LC, mass spec, ion chromatography, sample prep from not only Thermo, but also other vendors. It's future-proofed, scalable, and flexible architecture, meaning it always comes up with new versions as needed, as the industry redefines itself or the regulations change. And it can also be scalable from a very small lab to a very large global organization. It meets all the compliance requirements that are set out in by GLP, by GMP, and it meets the requirements of the US FDA 21 CFR Part 11. I should say that it provides you with tools to meet those requirements. So what is a chromatography data system? Well, in a very basic nutshell, it has CDS has 4 major functions. It controls your chromatography instruments. It automates analysis of samples. Then it can evaluate the results for you and finally report the results. So basically, you get these samples and vials, and what you need to produce is the results. And you have to go to various steps to get to that. And Chromeleon makes those steps intuitive and easy to perform. Let's look at the user interface now. When you start Chromeleon, you are shown the Chromeleon console. The console gives you access to the instruments, to control it, to equilibrate it, and then also the console gives you access to your data and also run e-workflows. I will show you all of these in a little bit. After your data has been acquired, you can open the studio where you can evaluate your data, build custom spreadsheet reports, and also sign them electronically. This is what the console looks like. You have access to all your instruments, either in the lab or globally. But you also have access to the audit trail, the queue, stuff like that. As you click on the various instruments, panels are produced automatically, which shows the real-time conditions of the various modules in the instrument, what the status is. Also in the console, besides the instrument, you have access to data, and in that window, you can navigate to all the data that you've acquired in all the various instruments, depending on whether you have the privilege to see that data or not. You see that, and also you have a category bar where you can choose whether you want to look at the instrument data or e-workflow. Furthermore, within the sequence itself, you have access to all the samples that have been run or will be run. Not only that, but you also have access to the results immediately by means of what we call mini plots. So you don't even have to open the sample. This is a view of a sequence right now to see if all the samples were run, finished, and if so, if they show all the peaks or not, all the important peaks. Once you open one of the samples, you open the studio where you again have category bars. For example, your injection list, your instrument method itself, your data processing, and also within the studio, you have a navigation pane for accessing not only the current sample, but other samples or standards of whatever in that sequence, and also the various channels and components that you may have defined. The window that you see in the studio is based on, it's very similar to what you see in Microsoft Office ribbon technology, meaning what you see is relevant to what window you're in, what options you see. And now in Chromeleon 732, they can be further fine-tuned to only show you what's important to you. So, as I mentioned, Chromeleon is not only intelligent, but it provides you operational efficiency. The way it does is by providing you with tools built into Chromeleon to make your life simpler and easier for you to do your day-to-day work. For example, in data processing, we have implemented data detection tools like Cobra and Smart Peaks to allow you to define criteria on how peaks should be detected. But also, we do dynamic data processing where any changes that you make while processing your data applies automatically. You don't have to reprocess by submitting a batch to be reprocessed. It's automatically done. Also, for quick data review processes, as I mentioned, we have mini pods. And also, you can, within your sequence itself, you can define criteria to evaluate whether a sample passes a test or not, all within the sequence itself. You don't even have to open the results to check to see whether it passes or not. You can just see which samples meet or not meet a specific criteria at the sequence level. Finally, to report the data, the data can be, the spreadsheets can be fully customizable to fit your laboratory requirements, and you can automatically print or export and also notify yourself or your manager when a sequence is finished and the reports have been generated. We also have predefined extension pack templates where with very little modification of the report, your reports are ready to be published. So let's look at a couple of these tools that are designed to make your life simpler and easier in the laboratory. So we spend a lot of time just processing the data in the laboratory. One of the things we have to do is, like, for example, define where should the peaks be detected. So we have a wizard called Cobra. You start the wizard, and what you need to do there is to just define the starting point and the end point where the integration or peak detection should happen. Next step, you define the baseline. After that, you define what is the narrowest peak which qualifies to be detectable. And then on the penultimate step, you define how small a peak should be to be detected as a peak. This is done by the criteria called minimum area. And finally, you apply all these 2 or 3 criteria, and your chromatogram is integrated automatically. To further fine-tune your chromatogram, there are additional criteria available, which you can define subsequently. Another tool that we have is called Smart Peaks. Smart Peaks is used for resolving non-baseline resolved peaks. So peaks that are right next to each other, which are not completely resolved. So then the question becomes, how should those two peaks be baseline resolved? Well, the way this tool works is you activate the Smart Peaks wizard, you select the area of interest where there might be unresolved peaks. For example, the last two peaks here are unresolved. And then you select, once you let your mouse cursor go, it shows you the various ways these two peaks can be defined. And you choose which option you want to use. For example, valley to valley, baseline resolve, exponentially skimmed riders, tangential at both ends rider, skimming, so on and so forth. You apply the criteria which your lab requires you to apply for unresolved peaks, unbaseline resolved peaks, and like that, your peaks will be resolved. Again, this happens to all the samples within that specific sequence. You don't have to resubmit for reprocessing. It's done automatically, hence saving you time. We also have various data visualization and interactive charting built into Chromeleon reports. These are interactive, so as you select one set of data versus another, the charts will change automatically. They're fully customizable, just like in Excel. But what the good thing about this is that you do not have to use Excel. You can do these charting within Chromeleon itself. And these are available for both on-screen and or for printing or exporting the reports. Another tool that helps you with your analysis of your data is, after you run a lot of samples, your manager might ask you, or regulatory agency might ask you, to show you specific samples that meet certain criteria. For example, in this case, you're asked to find all samples of type standard, calibration standard, which were injected on a specific HPLC using a specific instrument method. And then furthermore, you may have to further fine-tune to look for only samples that have a peak name called methyl. So you define those criteria in this data mining tool using a very simple interface. You don't need to know a SQL language or any programming language. You don't need to involve your IT or admin or anybody. You can, as a user or lab manager, define these criteria yourself within Chromeleon. And once you click finish, it provides you a list of all the samples that meet those criteria that we defined up here. As I mentioned before, we have interactive charting available for our reports. The reports are very much like Excel. You don't have to export your data from Chromeleon into Excel to create reports, but rather a Excel-like report is available within Chromeleon itself. Any calculations that you would normally do in Excel can be done in Chromeleon itself. The benefit of this is that, first of all, if you have to meet any regulatory requirements, your data remains secure. There's less of a burden on you to prove if any data was modified outside Excel, outside Chromeleon. And also there's no data transcription error. So furthermore, just like in Excel, if you do any calculations in your spreadsheet, you can do that in Chromeleon itself. This is Chromeleon. This is not Excel. And furthermore, if you define a condition to report a flag, you can define those criteria using if and or conditions to evaluate those criteria and raise flags if needed. Again, this was all done in Chromeleon. Within the Chromeleon console, there's also a tool called eWorkflow. As I mentioned on my second slide, in my introductory slide, eWorkflow offers you a unique automation technology where you as a user can go from creating your sequence, defining your instrument method, processing method, reporting template, everything with just 3 steps. First step you have to do is to choose which eWorkflow you want to use today in your laboratory. You select which eWorkflow. eWorkflows have to be defined previously, of course, but once they're defined, they're available to you, and you click on Launch. After that, you enter the number of samples you want to run today using that eWorkflow, and where is the first sample being placed in the auto sampler. And then your sequence is created automatically and is ready to be run immediately. So just 3 steps. Once you submit that sequence to the instrument and all the samples have been run, the eWorkflow also processes all your data and calculates all results and creates all the reports. eWorkflows boost lab productivity by as much as 50%, meaning you save a lot of time using eWorkflows versus having to define sequences, methods, everything yourself each time. All associated methods and files, for example, instrument methods, processing methods, reports, and even external documents like SOPs are included in this eWorkflow package. So using eWorkflows, not only do you save time, but you also ensure your SOP is followed, your laboratory's standard operating procedures are followed. You reduce any chances of errors and produce reliable results faster. And eWorkflows can be customized for any application in any laboratory, for example, QA, QC, R&D, things like that. Perhaps the most important benefit of all of this is that you don't have to do much training for a newcomer in your laboratory. You just tell them which eWorkflow to use, and they can start working on day one without much training. Another tool we have in Chromeleon called Intelligent Run Control basically uses criteria as defined to automate injection decisions to be made using results that have already been obtained. So for example, you may want to determine what the previous injection looks like before you allow the next injection to be made. And if the criteria of the previous injection does not meet the requirement you have defined, then you can set conditions to modify the next injection before starting that sample set. Furthermore, system suitability is included in Chromeleon, the base software itself, and can also be run using the wizard. Let me give you an example of how you would use intelligent run control. One example would be to check on component carryover. You may want to define a test call, define a test which checks the area of a specific peak. If that peak is less than a specific value, then you can continue, meaning there is no carryover. But, for example, if the peak area is larger than that value, then you may want to add a blank injection onto your system in that sequence and then rerun this test. And if it meets the criteria, meaning the peak is less than 5 MAU, then re-inject your sample. Another test would be to automatically dilute a sample. For example, if a component concentration is within the tolerated range defined by you, then go ahead and make the next injection. If it does not, then dilute the sample, reinsert that injection after reapplying that test. So these are the various things that you can do, various actions that you can enforce in intelligent run control. But the benefit of all of this is that you do not waste time. You do not waste valuable samples. If, for example, the previous sample shows that there's a problem, for example, carryover. Okay, so far I've shown you everything that helps you as an end user, but now slowly moving over to administrative and IT side of things, I should point out that Chromeleon not only controls Thermo, LC, GC, IC, and MS, but it also controls about 500 instruments and modules from other manufacturers of LCs and GCs. Some of those are listed here, like Agilent, Waters, Shimatsu, PerkinElmer, the CTC PAL sampler. For the GC side, Marcus thermal desorbers, Varian instruments, and now recently we have also incorporated capillary electrophoresis instruments within Chromeleon. So besides various instruments, you also might want to integrate various business critical software with Chromeleon. For that, we have a tool called the Integration Manager, which provides bi-directional interfaces with existing business systems or hardware that you're already using in your lab. For example, any LIMS software. If it's a thermo LIMS, for example, the sample manager, the connection already exists. You can transfer data from sample manager into Chromeleon, create a sequence, run those results, run those samples, and then export the results for the samples back into LIMS. If it's some other LIMS not from Thermo Fisher, we have application programming interface that uses our software development kit to create such connections. There might already be a connection from other vendors' LIMS, but if there is not, then the connection can be developed using these tools. So what are some of the benefits of this? One benefit would be that you can have real-time information for instrument status and queue in various LIMS. You can select samples in LIMS and create e-workflow sequences in Chromeleon. You don't have to manually import LIMS samples information into Chromeleon, but you can automatically transfer the LIMS information, sample information into Chromeleon. And then on the flip side, export Chromeleon results directly into LIMS using this connectivity tool. The instrument overview tool in Chromeleon, or the view, offers users a high-level overview of the real-time status of the various instruments. For example, shows them which instruments are being used, which ones are not being used and are available. And this can be accessed really easily, really quickly in the console window. For the managers, it provides a little bit more detail. For example, we all have favorite instruments based on proximity, based on whatever criteria that we use day to day. So it shows the manager which instruments are being underutilized. So you might want to make sure that all of your instruments, all of your HPLCs are being used instead of just one or two all the time. So that only those two instruments are not being worn down unnecessarily, but all of the other instruments are being used as well. Another feature, another benefit of this overview window is that if there is an error status or disconnection from the system, then your manager will know right away and can either fix it themselves or involve admin or IT. Moving on, Chromeleon offers dongle-free licensing starting from the current version of Chromeleon 7.3. You don't need a physical dongle anymore, and this can be deployed either for virtual instrumentations, cloud, or physical installations. Automation is automatic using online, email, phone. You can always add more licenses as your organization grows. And another big benefit of Chromeleon is that it offers concurrent model, meaning user licenses are not named for individual users or computers. The same license can be used by different users from different computers using personal credentials. So basically what that means is that anybody can use any available license. You just cannot exceed the total number of licenses available, but they're not allocated to individuals. You can manage your licenses either globally or locally as needed. And all of this is privilege controlled, meaning only people that have the ability or the privilege to make changes to manage licenses can do so. Moving over to regulatory compliance. Chromeleon realizes that international regulatory agencies are very focused on data to ensure the integrity, authenticity, and reliability of electronic records and signatures in industries that are regulated like pharmaceutical industry. Specifically, the software must be capable of 21 CFR Part 11 compliance as defined by the US FDA. Again, the keyword here is capable. It must provide the tools or features to ensure compliance. It still falls upon the organization to ensure that they are complying by the requirements using the tools that are available in Chromeleon. Chromeleon can be compliance can be considered in four categories: the security of the tool, record management, audit trails, qualifications. All of these are remembered, or the requirements can be defined or remembered by the acronym ALCOA+. What does that mean? Well, the A stands for attributable. Basically, what it means is that you must be able to attribute everything that was done. Who did what and when did they do that? All that information should be recorded by login information as credentials and all that. The data should be legible and readable throughout the life cycle of the product. It must be contemporaneous, meaning it must be recorded at the time of activity. You're not supposed to like enter information after the fact. It should be an original copy or a certified copy, or it must be accurate. It must have no errors, and it should not allow any undocumented editing, meaning if any editing is done to any chromatography results or whatever, it must be documented by who did it and when did they did it and why. It must be complete. It must be consistent. It must be enduring. It should be available in some form throughout the life cycle of the product. We have customers who have results from 30 years ago, and because regulatory agency might ask them to look data from 25 years ago or whatever, they have to ensure that all that data is kept, regardless of versions of Chromeleon. Coming back to security, data integrity, and compliance, it's important that the software tool protects software against any malicious behavior, that your data is backed up in case there's a disaster, for disaster recovery. If the network goes down, the data should still be safe, and you should still be able to use your instruments as needed, regardless of current status of the network. For compliance reasons, you must have user management tools to restrict access and define who can do what in what role. The software should have built-in qualification tools, and furthermore, it must have comprehensive audit trails, tools to record all data. Looking at audit trails, Chromeleon offers three types of audit trails to query, three data objects that you can query. The first one is the data audit trail, which I briefly showed you when I showed you data mining. That's a kind of data audit trail. Furthermore, there's instrument audit trail, what was done to various instruments at different times, whether a module was serviced or not, when was a module changed, things like that. And finally, administration audit trail. If a user role was changed, if any privileges were changed, so on and so forth, all those information should be in the audit trail and should be queried against. So Chromeleon offers you query at a very basic level, at the start level. You just go to the query option and you can select what do you want to query, which object you want to query against, and then you start the query. These queries can be saved and rerun as needed in the future. All this helps you meet your regulatory requirements when the regulatory agency keeps knocking on the door. Data audit trail is like finding the needle in the haystack. You might have decades of data, and the regulatory agency might ask you to show you specific results. So the audit trail helps you do that really quickly in a graphical interface format without knowing any programming languages or SQL queries or things like that. And furthermore, you can also report the data using charts and stuff. So for example, if there's any anomalous behavior, you can not only see it, but you can also read comments about why those happen. And this can be produced in a audit report for submission purposes. For IT sits in their own cocoon, and they need to do various things, not only to Chromeleon, but to the data. And most of the times, they do it remotely. So Chromeleon enables IT to do most of their functions and work from a remote basis, on a remote basis. Some of this work that IT needs to do on a regular basis might be operating system updates, backing up the data for disaster recovery, and also installing new updates of Chromeleon as they're released. You can imagine having to go to each and every computer to do any of these things is not easy, also is very time consuming, and scheduling may not be a very easy task. So all of these functions can be done remotely. There are maintenance windows to define which maintenance tasks are executed and at what time. For example, distribution of Chromeleon updates, operating system updates, and you can even run installation qualifications, operation qualifications remotely. One of the examples is system maintenance. The IT has a tool called the Chromeleon Administration Console, and they can select or choose a maintenance window where they can define what time, for example, an upgrade should be implemented or deployed. They can do it from remotely without having to go to individual computers. They can even choose whether this distribution should be on specific computers or whether globally. All these things manage the IT department's life easier, and also ensures that compliance requirements are met, because there's always going to be a timestamp of what was done and when it was done. And furthermore, it ensures business continuity. You don't have to go interrupt somebody from doing their work to install an update. They can back up data, they can back up manage data vaults and stuff like that remotely at specific times while maintaining business uptime. If, for example, a module needs to be modified or changed within an instrument, that modification can be done remotely on the software side. For system security, there's a centralized management from any Chromeleon CD's chromatography data software PC. This allows easy administration of licenses, scheduling. For example, the IT might schedule to archive data on a weekly basis. This can be done remotely across the organization. They can modify user accounts and settings also remotely, and can do station audit trails from anywhere. Finally, Chromeleon also provides network failure protection, NFP, which ensures 24/7 uptime and zero data loss. Meaning, if anything happens and the network goes down, connecting the instrument to the central database, then the data is not lost. You are not stopped from continuing your work. You can still continue doing your work, acquire data, process data for up to 7 days. That's a requirement that the issue be resolved within 7 days. Once it's resolved, all the work that was done locally on the computer with the instrument is uploaded to the server in the centralized location. For the laboratory admin, we have an admin console, which provides them various abilities. For example, if a new person is added to the laboratory, comes and joins the laboratory, you can add that person, assign what role they play. For example, a basic user, an advanced user, a manager, also what privileges they have. For example, can they create a sequence? Can they create an instrument method? Can they modify an existing method? Can they create a processing method? Can they modify that? All those can be defined using the user management tool by the admin. This admin might be the laboratory manager, might be IT, might be a power user or users. But all those things can be defined. The same person also can have multiple roles. For example, I might be an admin, but I might also be a HPLC user. So if I want to log into Chromeleon as an admin to add another user, I would use that role and privilege. But after doing that, let's say I want to use the HPLC myself, I log out and then I log in as an HPLC user with my credentials for that role, and then I can create a sequence and start my run. If a sequence needs to be submitted, you can ask for approval by your manager so that you ensure that there's no mistake being done. The sequence is correct. IQ, OQ, PQ can all be done within Chromeleon itself, not just for the hardware, but also for the software. Okay, shifting gears here, let's look at some of the various ways Chromeleon can be deployed. Chromeleon can be controlling just one single computer with one or two instruments, or it could be on a network with multiple computers and instruments, various clients that are being used for writing sequences, processing data, so on and so forth. So for that, we have what we call the enterprise solution, which is different from a standalone Chromeleon setup, which was this one here. The big benefit of the enterprise is that, for example, you have a centralized data storage, which can be accessed from not just one computer, but from other computers also. You have 24/7 uptime using the network failure protection that I defined previously. You have load balancing and failover on the various servers, and it's cloud ready. So in a very simple network, you might have various instruments that are connected locally to the enterprise network, but which is only deployed within the laboratory or organization. Nobody from outside can access it. So in this case, you would have a centralized license management. You could share the license concurrently, and you can have multiple sessions going on at the same time. As your organization grows and your needs modify, you can expand that network to be a global wide area network where you have different locations connected to each other with different instruments, with different databases. You might even have shared application services like Citrix, so on and so forth. And you can also access any of these remotely from anywhere around the world. All this is an example of an enterprise network. Chromeleon can also be deployed on the cloud or in the cloud, where there is no on-premise database, on-premise service. The cloud provider, service provider like Amazon AWS, MS Azure provides you with all of those services, which, by the way, are scalable, meaning as your organization grows, you can increase, for example, how much database requirement is there for you? How much space do you need on that database? So on and so forth. Security privileges, everything can be done using Chromeleon on the cloud also. If you have an enterprise Chromeleon setup, we provide you with a support plan, which gives you, first of all, it provides you with any updates that are available for free within the time of your support plan. And you also have dedicated technical support to resolve business critical issues from our enterprise Chromeleon team. And you have exclusive access to our online e-service portal, where you can read any documentation we have, training, and also log any issues you might be having with Chromeleon for a timely resolution online by raising a ticket. So to summarize, Chromeleon is the global CDS, gold standard for chromatography data system. It's built for the lab, it's built for IT, and it's built for remote operations. Some of the things that I showed you included easy and quick access to data, including data processing using Cobra and Wizard, the reporting tool, the charting, the data mining tool, e-workflows, so on and so forth. All these help you increase your productivity in the lab. For the IT side, we have the system maintenance interface, where the IT can perform remote updates or even install from on a global level. It provides the IT with tools for security and backup of data to ensure the system is up all the time and no data is being lost. And finally, we also have tools for remote operations, for example, user management tools to ensure compliance requirements are met. And also we have a scalable solution from small local networks to global wide area networks. And we have a flexible licensing to allow concurrent usage and low cost modeling. So I'm sure you have more questions, but besides writing those questions in the chat window now, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible, we also have tools online where you can read more about Chromeleon, about specific areas of Chromeleon, and also participate by either blogging or joining the Chromeleon CDS user group on LinkedIn and other social media. We have webinars on a regular basis. For example, recently we introduced Chromeleon 7.3.2, the long-term support version. We also have Chromeleon University, where you can get access to either free or paid training and documents. So there's a lot of tools online. You can go to thermofisher.com/Chromeleon to gain access to these. So with that, I thank you for your attention. And Hannah, if there's any questions that need to be addressed, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you for presentation. It was very useful and interesting. Now I can't see any question, but just I offer wait some minutes for it. Якщо в когось є запитання, можливо, якісь там уточнення, чи хотіли б почути там більше інформації про одну з, я не знаю, можливо, там переваг Chromeleon. Якщо у вас будуть запитання, прошу писати їх в чат. Ми постараємось на них швиденько і оперативно відповісти, щоб всі отримали ту інформацію, яка їм цікава.
Are there any questions?
No questions.
Oh, okay. So,
So I think it will understandable and clearly.
okay. If there are any questions, always you can feel free to forward them to me.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
So thank you for this webinar. Thank you for your time and your efforts for it. It was really interesting. So I hope we can get contact for Chromeleon or another question. So thank you. Дякую всім, що відвідали наш вебінар. Бажаю всім мирних різдвяних і новорічних свят. Побачимось з вами вже на наступному вебінарі після Нового року. Запрошуємо вас всіх. Він буде присвячений автоматизації тонкошарової хроматографії. Тому, якщо ви в своїй лабораторії використовуєте цей метод аналізу, тому запрошуємо відвідати, послухати про те, які бувають рішення для того, щоб автоматизувати, можливо, певні процеси або навіть і весь процес тонкошарової хроматографії, починаючи від нанесення і закінчуючи обробкою даних. Тому дякуємо всім за ваш час. Мирного всім дня. До побачення. Thank you, Jawad. I think we can end this webinar.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hannah. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.